face it head on. The conversations are not easy or comfortable. We owe it to the children of the city to not only have the tough conversations, but be bold and swift about what changes must be made now. I believe we are also here today to talk about a bigger problem that is pervasive and systemic. The problem that is woven into student attendance, standardized test scores and grades, teacher evaluations, principal ratings, and school budgets. If we do not grapple publicly and honestly with the role that institutional racism and racial bias plays in our society and the impact that it has on our public education, we will continue to spin our wheels in efforts to close the achievement gap. The public education system in the District of Columbia has come a long way, but we know that indeed we have a long way to go to claim any success. The evaluative report of the Public Education Reform Amendment Act, or PARA, from 2015 highlighted specific issues of concern in every year. Since receiving that report, I have questioned the Deputy Mayor for Education, DC Public Schools, the Public Charter School Board, and OSSE about how they are addressing the report's recommendations. The Committee on Education has been committed to analyze, legislate, and then fund the recommendations from that report. I'm going to take a minute now to walk through some of the work that we have done in the committee to be responsive. To build on the strength and performance of OSSE and in recognizing that there was a failure to sufficiently collect data and use technology to our advantage, I worked with the agency to get the additional funding needed for the data vault and build out of SLED. Through oversight, we pressed OSSE, the DME, the Public Charter School Board, and the State Board to have more transparency and clarity about their function by holding more public meetings, putting more content on their websites, and being overall more responsive. Through oversight and monthly meetings with the Chancellor, conversations with the City Administrator and the CFO, we have raised and continue to raise the unequal distribution of highly effective teachers across the city. I consistently worked with the Chancellor and the President of the WTU for 4 years to encourage meaningful negotiations to get a good faith agreement done on the teacher's contract. I have worked tirelessly for 2 years on the inequities in terms of student discipline and access to challenging learning opportunities. The Committee on Education passed, and earlier this month, the Council unanimously adopted the Fair Access to School Amendment Act, which will limit the suspension and expulsion of students just to situations of safety. This new law will directly address the school-to-prison pipeline and the loss in instructional time from suspensions that contributes directly to the achievement gap. To further address the growing achievement gap, particularly for students with disabilities, English language learners, and students in poverty, I challenged my team to come up with immediate legislative solutions. One was the introduction of the Language Access for Education Amendment Act of 2017, a bill to provide greater access to education for English language learners. That bill was approved by both this committee and the Committee on the Judiciary, but it has languished in the Committee of the Whole for well over a year. For students with disabilities, we held 2 public roundtables, wrote a report about the status of education and services. We have tracked the work of DCPS, charter schools, and OSSE to implement the special education laws from 2014, which is finally coming to fruition with the lifting of the final subject to appropriation clause in this year's budget. This committee has made significant investments in the last 4 budgets towards closing the achievement gap, including the early literacy intervention program that we established, increasing the uniform per student funding formula last year and the at-risk weights this year, enhancing funding for community schools and restorative practices, and bringing a focus to the non-academic needs of students and families that impact educational outcomes from trauma and adversity to behavioral and physical health. Despite the advances we have made on the recommendations from the PARA report on data collection, there are legitimate criticisms about the credibility of certain data points that we have celebrated. This has led to questions about the integrity of our educational data overall. Data is important, and we need more of it, but data is not everything. We must also ask the right questions and apply it correctly, and we must guard against the measurements becoming more important than the reasons for originally measured. While there are many improvements that need to be made regarding how we collect and analyze data, we have a consensus between the Council and the Mayor, the importance of data and its accuracy. We have a State Superintendent of Education who has transformed her agency into one that is far more credible than any previous time in its decade of existence. I'm skeptical of the value of creating a new entity that would gather and analyze data separate from our state education agency, OSSE, when that is exactly the kind of capacity we've been building at OSSE over the last 3 years. I'm similarly skeptical that this new entity would be any freer of political influence than OSSE currently is. Rather, I think we should focus the dollars and the energy that will go into creating such an entity toward further strengthening OSSE's abilities and insulating the agency from more political interference. The Alvarez and Marcel report on high school graduation policies and practices showed the high level of work of which OSSE is capable of doing. The question is, how we get the agency to do more of that type of work. And I hope to hear from witnesses today on that matter. Similarly, in an effort to close the achievement gap, this committee has sought to target resources to the students and schools that need them the most. Implementation of the at-risk funding wave was far from perfect, but one of the challenges has been the lack of transparency with how those dollars have been spent. There are also real questions about spending by LEAs on administrative needs versus students' needs. This committee and the school communities across the District of Columbia have spent years trying to get more transparency about the DCPS budget. This year, the issue came to a head as the Committee on Education sought to more accurately account for DCPS's projected enrollment, but we were prevented from doing so because the agency had already committed the dollars, not to schools, but to programs in the central office. Without a real understanding of how DCPS spends its dollars and the spending pressures that it faces on the by-right schools, we cannot properly budget. We also cannot have a proper conversation about whether the current budgeting framework of the UPSFF, which was created by Congress in the 1990s, continues to make sense in the District of Columbia. We cannot have the honest conversation about what changes, if any, might need to be made. And with the LEA payment initiative on pause, schools crying out they're having to cut up staff, and over 1,000 DCPS seniors not likely to graduate high school, I feel a sense of urgency here. If the language that the committee included in its budget report to require greater transparency from the mayor and DCPS about budgeting and educational funding was struck from the budget by Chairman Mendelson. Despite unanimous committee approval, the council yesterday passed a budget that allows for lack of transparency by DCPS and the mayor to continue. And I hope to hear from witnesses today about these issues as well. Through this hearing and a series of conversations in the coming months, I intend to focus on what more needs to be done by the legislative branch to fulfill the promise of school reform, a promise that puts every student in the best position to succeed. This is just one of many opportunities for the public to weigh in on these important questions. In addition to the numerous oversight hearings and roundtables that the committee has held over the past 4 months, I will also be holding town halls in all 8 wards again this summer to hear directly from residents, parents, students, teachers, and anyone else who wants to join us within our neighborhoods. I also encourage the public to stay up to date with the activities of the work that this committee is doing by visiting my website at www.davidgrosso.org. And with that, I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for being here today. I look forward to your presentation and any conversation that we can have thereafter. So we are going to stick to the normal council rules on procedure. We'll have 3 minutes and 5 minutes for people who are representing an organization, 3 minutes for individuals. And we're going to move right along. We have quite a few witnesses, and it's getting into the evening already. And this is, I think, very important time. And so I hope that everyone can engage honestly and openly. And then, as we move forward, continue to engage with my office as directly as you know it is available. So with that, I'm going to call up the first panel of witnesses. First, we have Emmanuel Cadillo, Chair, DC Education Coalition for Change. We also have Chelsea Coffin, Director of Education Policy Initiative at the DC Policy Center. Ms. Liz Davis, I do not see her in the room. Scott Goldstein, Executive Director of Empower Ed. And Zia Hassan, Board Secretary of Empower Ed. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate your engagement and look forward to hearing what your testimony is.
Well, thank you so much, Councilmember Grosso, and thank you so much for the other council members here on education. First of all, to you, Councilmember Grosso, I want to say thank you for your investment, especially with the success of the Fair Student Access Act. the past, as well as the initial investments to help implement that with the first vote yesterday. This is a good time for this conversation. It's been about 10 years since this was the last big shakeup in education here in the District of Columbia, and it's always good to have a 10-year review of just about anything, just to ensure is it working, what needs to be fixed, what needs to be evaluated, what needs to be tossed aside, and what needs to be added in. And so I think also being in a new era where soon we will have a new chancellor and a new deputy mayor of education, this is the perfect time for this conversation. As chair of the DC Education Coalition for Change, we chat with folks and students, stakeholders, teachers, and parents all throughout DC to learn about what are their main concerns, what are things that they face. And so we look forward to being part of this conversation as we look into the reform of the school district, because the reform that affects DCPS and the charter schools and all the educational institutions here, the main people who are affected by it are our students. And we got to make sure that that is the main thing that the focus is on while we do this. And so some ideas to take a look at in regards to educational reform is ensuring that we allow innovation to flourish in our schools. The innovation shouldn't just be with the charter schools and their flexibility. It should also be in the DCPS schools. We've seen it in some areas where they have some success dual language programs and also our academies as well. We need to ensure that our schools have the flexibility to have what's needed in their communities in order for our students to succeed there. We need to ensure that our teachers are not just teaching, but they become leaders, that their voices are heard and the decisions being made in the direction of their schools. They talk with the students more often than anyone else, and they should be having the access to be able to contribute to the direction of the schools. We need to get out of this fear of failure. I think a lot of this data point that's happening is that people are afraid of showing, like, guess what, my school isn't doing so well, I don't want to get in trouble. Look, we understand that a lot of our students are facing tough situations. That it doesn't matter even if the best teachers are available, it's going to be tough to teach the students because they may be abused, they may be facing trouble in their homes, they may be fearful that their parents may be deported. That affects the students as well. And so we need to find a system in which it's okay to allow that maybe my school didn't do so well this year, but look, this is because of this. Half our students are facing trauma. Half our students, don't go to school because they're facing a fear of some sort, and be able to work with that without, punishing, administrator or teachers, but instead encouraging the system, the school district and the school leaders to work together to find what are those innovations that need done in those areas to improve that. It's ensuring that things are transparency. We spoke earlier, Council Member, about at-risk funding. We believe that needs to be transparent to ensure that where that dollars is going needs to go to those students who need that funding the most, not necessarily to operationals. So we are very hopeful that hopefully in this reform we're able to have that transparency, so we know where the funding is going. But overall, this is just one of the first conversations, and we look forward to working with you, Council Member, and the rest of the Council members on this conversation. Please use this as a partner as you do your town halls, as you do your meetings and focus groups. Use this as a partner. We have hundreds of students and parents and stakeholders that we have in our membership, and we will love to be able to speak and share what can be done to help improve our schools, because we all care about our schools here, because if our education shines, our city shines. And so we're here to be available in order to help to share our ideas, to share comments on any ideas that the council, committees, or partners here put forward, to be able to ask some insights and be able to help contribute with every single step of the way of whatever comes out of this reform. Because at the end of the day, it's the students that are most affected by it. And if we're not working with the teachers or the administrators into that, then what are we doing? And so once again, please use this as a partner, and we look forward to engaging. This is a very important topic. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Scott.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Grasso and members of the Committee on Education. My name is Chelsea Kaufman, and I'm the Director of the Education Policy Initiative at the DC Policy Center, an independent think tank committed to advancing policies for a vibrant and growing economy in the District of Columbia. I thank you for the opportunity to testify on the future of public school reform in the District of Columbia today. There are many ways to evaluate DC school reforms. As framing, I focus my testimony on one metric that measures how families are valuing the district schools, and that is whether families choose to stay in the district and choose to enroll their children in public schools at higher rates. Looking at the data, we know that there are more children living in the city now than before the DC Public Education Reform Amendment Act, or GAP. From 2008 to 2016, the school-age population more than doubled, rising from over 77,500 to over 158,500. In addition to more families living in the city, higher shares of children are enrolling in public elementary and middle schools compared to the babies that were born in previous years. For example, from 2008 to 2016, the number of students in kindergarten as a percentage of births in DC 5 years earlier rose from 67% to 81%. Families choosing to stay in DC and its public schools after PARE represents a turnaround and comes after at least 25 years of a declining child population. Despite increased confidence in DC schools, as demonstrated by these higher enrollment rates, recent data scandals have called into question the success of DC school reforms. To address these data issues, there has been a move to create a research advisory board, establish a research collaborative, and undertake an extensive audit of education data since 1988. There is no doubt that the city needs accurate data to assess progress in education. However, the proposed comprehensive audit of education data would require a tremendous amount of resources and would not focus research efforts to address recent issues such as improving the quality of graduation rate data. It would be better, for example, to target efforts and systematically check transcripts against attendance records or credit recovery against current coursework, as has been suggested. If an independent assessment is needed to shine light on specific data, the district's Office of the Auditor already has the broad authority to request data without creating a new body. Separately, there is the question of streamlined access to education data to improve education research. However, models of research alliances that generate this outcome, for example, data consortia similar to those in Tennessee and Chicago, look very different to what has been proposed. Successful research alliances, by and large, are associated with a university and set research agendas in collaboration with education stakeholders to provide constructive findings. Most importantly, they are not guided by political appointees. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Ms. Gold. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Chairman Grasso, thank you for holding this roundtable discussion today. My name is Scott Goldstein, the founder and executive director of Empower Ed, teacher empowerment group working to build trust and teacher leadership in DC schools. For the past 10 years, I've been a teacher and taught in both DC charter and public schools. And for many, the past year has represented a shaking of confidence in the public school system we were promised was on a historic rise. But what this revealed to me and so many of the professionals who have inhabited this space for the past decade is that we have more to do to have the voices in our education system heard and acted upon before the media spotlight forces the issue. It's no longer enough to listen to students, teachers, parents, and community members. We have to make sure their voices are integral to school and district decision making. Empower Ed is mobilizing teachers, both public and public charter, with a common goal: create a system that is more collaborative and less oppositional than the one we have now. Our goal is to lift the voices of teachers to improve schools. You'll hear from Empower Ed teachers today about a broad range of issues, from school discipline to curriculum flexibility and charter transparency. Empower Ed doesn't take a stance on each of these issues. Our goal is to elevate the voices of these teachers and allow their advocacy to take center stage, whatever that may be, because we believe that a system that is informed by its primary practitioners is one that will be a better system for our students. There's a lot of good happening every day in DC schools right now. DCPS is providing a wide array of options for students, both within and outside classroom walls. Students are studying abroad. Outside partnerships are connecting students to job and internship opportunities like never before. We're increasing dual language programs across the city to cater to demand. We built state-of-the-art facilities that show that we value our students. Many of our charter schools serve unique student populations and experiment in ways we can learn great lessons from, whether that be family literacy programs, serving overage and undercredited students, language immersion beyond Spanish, and much more. But we have to fight to have a more unified system in which autonomy doesn't only exist in charters and accountability doesn't only address DCPS. We can and must have a rigorous process for recruitment and hiring of new teachers across DC schools, one that prioritizes educators of color, content experts, and passionate, inspired educators who can innovate to address the complex needs of our students. As turnover has increased, we've also lost out on experienced teachers who have long-lasting relationships with students. I've known myself two experienced and dynamic educators at the same school who have retired early this year due to a climate where messages, both subtle and explicit, have told them they can be replaced by younger teachers at half the cost and the school won't lose out. Teacher-student relationships matter, and that's why we should never accept arguments that somehow teacher churn is a positive. Numbers that cite only the retention of highly effective teachers are isolated from the reality that our evaluation systems have often substituted experienced teachers for new ones, and disproportionately impacted teachers of color. Research shows that teachers are not their most effective until years 3 to 5, and perhaps more importantly, teachers are not numbers. They are individuals who impact the lives of our students in so many ways beyond test scores, by connecting them to opportunities through personal counseling and advice, and by inspiring them to learn and lead every day. This committee has begun an extended dialogue to step back and evaluate whether, after a decade of education reform in DC, we're headed in the right direction or need to make any course corrections. Growing out of this year's controversies has been increased voice of teachers, students, parents, community members, and advocates alike. But we also know that teachers raised their voices about these concerns before the media, and until news reports prompted public outcry, little was done to address them. So now it's time to take the next step. DC schools have long listened to teacher voice, but not heard. Talk alone is not enough. Leadership opportunities can no longer be consigned to teacher cabinets and roundtables. We need to establish real structures to ensure these important voices in all schools are not used to affirm policies that are already designed, or as middlemen to implement someone else's ideas, but as real decision makers. We also need to ensure the structures that we already have in place, like LSATs and others, are utilized properly. Throughout the country, teacher-led schools have demonstrated that when teachers take the lead, we can increase innovation and begin problem solving for our students, rather than implement whole district initiatives that are ill-equipped for high-need, high-poverty schools where local leaders need the autonomy to problem solve for their unique population. We should work towards this end here in DC. Significant research shows a correlation between increased teacher leadership and student achievement. Today you'll hear from several teachers ready to lead, and we look forward to bringing their voices front and center every day in our schools to build a system that is empowering for everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Councilmember and all. My name is Zia Hassan. I'm a board member for Empower Ed. And when I was a teacher at DCS, one of my very favorite students came to me and she was really excited. Mr. Hassan, she said, my teacher just gave me my reading assessment. I got to reading level Y. That means if I increase my reading level by one more letter, I will get to level Z. That's the last level. That's great, I told her. You must have really worked hard and read a lot of books at home. Yeah, she said, and she added gleefully, once I reach the last level, I won't ever have to read a book again. The problem is that they've been given the impression by adults that mastery is a ladder, that all you have to do is keep climbing, that once you reach the top of the ladder, you've achieved mastery. The mastery game we play with kids is more about the what and the how than it is about the why. Why do we want to be a proficient reader? It's not to get to the next reading level. It's so we can quickly and efficiently learn new things about the world, to solve problems, or to express our original ideas. Reading a text about a rock cycle isn't very meaningful if it doesn't make us stop and think the next time we pick up a stone on the playground. Comprehending a text about the Revolutionary War doesn't mean anything unless we connect it to the problems of economic inequality that exist in today's world. Mastery is not a ladder, it's a safari. Project-based learning, active exploration of real-world challenges and problems. I was once told by an administrator, stop letting kids play with rocks in your geology reading lesson. You're a reading teacher, not a science teacher. I tried an experiment a few years ago when I was applying for a teaching job at numerous schools in DC. At the end of my interview, when the administrators asked me if I had any other questions, I asked them, what project have you seen a student engage in that has amazed you, that has challenged your own thinking, or that has provided something useful to the community? I wanted to hear how students were connecting their skills to the world around them, a world that they are desperately trying to understand and heal. The answer I got most of the time was that their favorite project was kids growing their reading level. And that is a fundamental skill, it's so important. But reading won't change the world. Readers change the world. It's when they look at the skill of reading as a first step in understanding a problem rather than a means to an end that we will unlock the potential of our students. This year, we've been very focused as a city on how we are or aren't moving our numbers along. This concern over the numbers manifests itself in fear and consequently suppression of teacher voice. Fear that trickles down from the DC government, to superintendents, to the administrators, to the teachers, and eventually to the students. We can propose policy and ask hard questions to DC public school officials that challenge the notion that mastery is a ladder. We can replace the fear with inquiry, joy, and passion. We just have to change the lens through which we look at education. We have to encourage schools to collaborate with Empower Ed to build teacher voice. If we have the courage to allow students to use what they've learned with their reading and math skills to change the world today, even in a small way, then we are preparing them to be leaders. We cannot afford to settle for anything less. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys, and I also appreciate your package testimony. It's a teacher like that. It's all numbered and on the way to the list. And you know, I think the things that are kind of on my mind right now are the things that everyone is talking about, and certainly there are 3 areas that I'd just like to follow up with, and anybody that wants to answer them can answer them at the panel. We're going to go through each panel kind of in a similar fashion. The one area is just enhancing transparency. Whether or not you've seen the language that I had in the Budget Support Act, whether or not you thought that might help, or if you have any suggestions on how we can do that. And I mean transparency about the budget almost specifically and particularly. The second area is greater accountability for DCPS, for charters. Is there need for more independence in OSSE? What does that look like in your minds? And then the third is a question that Ms. Coughlin directly addressed in her testimony about this independent evaluation idea, which I personally have come out now against, but not because I'm against evaluations. I think it's important for us to do regular evaluations, but I think they can tend to be more exclusive than we would intend them to be. So what I mean by that is I want to hear from the teachers, I want to hear from the students, I want to hear from the parents. For example, there are 1,956 DCPS students that potentially will not graduate from high school this year. I want to hear from them and their parents and their families and friends about what were the struggles that they ran into and why is it that they're now faced with going to summer school or repeating a grade. And so those are the 3 areas. I'm happy to take any comments on those, and maybe you could just point to your testimony if you want. You don't have to repeat it. And I'm just willing to give you guys a minute to talk, whoever wants to engage. And if you don't have anything to say, it's okay. I'm not going to put you on the spot. You can always engage after this hearing. This is an open forum discussion for the future too. So submit more written testimony on these things. Send me give me a call. Come meet with me as well. Mr. Cadita, do you want to add something?
I think when it comes to transparency, I think we just want to make sure that it's understandable by the parents and the students, in the way that it's presented. I think just hearing inside, what about in regards to at-risk funding that folks need to know about? You know, is it per dollars per student? Is it an activity? How much is it? How was it made? How much was contributed? What were the results of that? I think it's something that we got to make sure that, especially, and this even goes down to the evaluation, it can be understood by a parent and a student, especially a parent that may be working multiple jobs or may not have much time, because it doesn't make sense to have it and they don't understand it. And how can they work with their student or their child and work with the teachers to ensure that they do the best that's necessary for their child. And then in regards to hearing from students, we'd love to help with that, to be able to chat with our students who maybe are not able to graduate this year and their parents, and be able to facilitate something with them. So we'd love to partner with you all on that.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. James. Anybody else want to add? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. If these are hot topics right now, and if we're going to move reform to the next level, we have to have this discussion. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Just very quickly, I wanted to add, transparency and accountability is important, but it's important as a base for what needs to happen next, right? Which is, we have to make sure that when we listen to these voices, whether they be students, teachers, parents, community members, that matches with the data that we're getting. I don't think a one-off review, like has been suggested, top to bottom review of the schools is sufficient. I think we need something more permanent than that, whatever form that takes, and I think it needs to be independent. But the goal of it, which I want to emphasize, is that when we hear from all these teachers, we have to make sure that what they're telling us is going on the ground in their schools is matching the data that we're seeing. And if it's not, we have to ask the right questions to make sure that it is. So when I get to hearing from them.
We've talked about this before, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I feel like that is exactly where the disconnect is. And so I think what I'm doing is I'm hearing, and the public officials in the city are hearing directly from DCPS, just as one LEA, of what they think is happening in the schools. And they're not connected as well as they should be to the schools. And then as a result, I've tried very hard to reach out to be involved with teachers and understand what they think is happening in the schools, and it's been very hard to do. How do we fix that?
So I just wanted to say, and our goal is to provide a much broader and more diverse group of teachers to come out and publicly testify to the right, so that we get a much broader, we're used to hearing 2 or 3 teachers testify pretty
Right.
routinely. Our goal is to make sure you're hearing from a much more
Right.
broader and diverse group of teachers, so we can make sure that collectively we're matching up what teachers are feeling and hearing in their schools with what we're getting in data.
I really appreciate that. Scott, you want to add anything, or you're going to let your testimony stand?
No.
I appreciate your testimony. Thank you. All right, thank you all very much. Next panel is made up of Ivan Hall, Mr. Hall. Dave Koenig, teacher at Paul Public Charter School. Elizabeth Koenig, teacher at DC Charter School. And Erica Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell, come on up. Mr. Hall, we'll start with you. All right. Let's make sure your microphone is on. And again, thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. I see you brought some of your kids. I guess these are your daughters.
Yeah,
right?
my two daughters, Maya and Isis.
Hey guys, how you doing? You know, this is all about you. You know that, right? And your education, how important it is. Go ahead, sir,
Okay,
please.
first of all, I want to say thank you all for having me. And I'm going to read directly from the paper because I could really freelance this, but I'll try to read directly to stick to the points. My name is Ivan Hall. I'm a father of two beautiful daughters, a native Washingtonian. Currently, my children attend Democracy Prep, a DC public charter school. We attended the school since its inception into the district 4 years ago. We originally decided to give Democracy Prep a try after below average results from local DCPS schools, Henley Elementary, and another DC public charter school, Excel Academy, that has recently and rightfully so had its charter revoked. During the past 4 years, there have been a roller coaster ride of unprecedented and unacceptable educational results, followed by a wave of behavior issues that have physically and emotionally affected my children to this day. There has been a narrative in the community that charter schools are a better choice. I would say that this is the reason most parents choose charter over basic public education, but from my research and my personal experiences, the quality of charter education in the district seems to vary from school to school. And in Ward 8, I'm yet to find any school that can provide a safe environment while providing a daily curriculum that's on par with the rest of the nation. But today, we'll just focus on Democracy Prep, a school that must have its charter revoked. We'll jump straight into it. These are some of the basic necessities that are lacking in this school. Number one, hot water. In April 2018, I was forced into filing a complaint with the DC Public Charter Board in regards to the school not having working hot water. I first made note of this to the school back in March. Action did not begin until I reported it to the Charter Board in April. Since then, they have fixed the water, but only on the middle school floor last I checked. Secondly, heating and AC. I had to also make a complaint to the director of the school about the lack of consistency with the heating and AC unit. I had actually come to an agreement during the winter with the director to allow students to keep their jackets on in class due to the extremities of the cold weather. Number three, bullying. 2 years ago at Democracy Prep, my 8-year-old daughter, who was 6 at the time, experienced an incident where 4 older scholars locked her in the bathroom, proceeded to jump her, put her head in the toilet, and other things. No staff was around to intervene. Since then, the school still has not put policies in place to prevent or address the bullying. This same daughter was moved to a different class this year because of bullying and behavior issues that cannot be resolved. Instead of addressing a bigger issue, they just moved my daughter because I've been so vocal, still allowing the same scholar to linger in the other class, terrorizing other students. Number four, behavior and discipline issues. Behavior is a hot topic here. On the quality school report done on March 23rd, 2018, they had some interesting statements here. And remember, at the time the school was on their best behavior, I actually attended the events that was referred to in the QSR. At the time, I was blown away at the effort the school put into Black History Month that week. Unfortunately, when I read the QSR and saw that was the week that they were there, it explained a lot because I'm yet to see that same attention and level of activity and involvement at the school. And in QSR, it was noted, here are a few quotes. Students went into behavioral crisis. Students became frustrated, overwhelmed for unknown reasons, which eventually escalated into them exhibiting bouts of crying, screaming, throwing objects in the classroom. Both instances, teachers demonstrated a lack of awareness regarding how to handle the crisis. Disrespect and inconsistency. Many students talk back to their teachers after receiving consequences. Teachers spend more time publicly condemning misbehavior by narrating deductions and redirecting students in a way that do not respect their dignity. One teacher inaccurately gave a student a consequence for having sound on his or her computer even though the sound was off. The student started to cry. The teacher did not apologize for the mistake. One teacher used a harsh tone and said phrases such as, "This is for you. I already went to school and know how to do this, so are you wasting my time?" The QSR team scored a disturbingly high 19% of the observations as unsatisfactory in this component. Number 5, professionalism of the staff, and which in my opinion is really the most important. Democracy Prep has become a cesspool of unprofessionalism exhibited by the majority of adults in the building. From teachers responding back to kids with name-calling, curse words, harsh statements. One teacher has a verbal argument with a middle school scholar. The student threatened to call her father. The teacher responded with, and I quote, "I didn't know you had a father." Just last week, a teacher disrespected a student and a parent came to the school for a physical confrontation with the teacher. I mentioned earlier the bullying my 8-year-old has faced. Just last month, a student elbowed her in the nose. She went to the nurse for relief, only to find out that they had no ice packs. Instead, they gave her a frozen bottle of water that they use for incidents like this. While receiving a relief, a staff member began to taunt my daughter, telling her there's always something with you. You're always in here. Another staff member referred to her as a drama queen. The staff is ignorant to all the physical and verbal abuse my daughter has faced in the school and outside of the school. So to be taunted by an adult is unacceptable. They have no idea of the effects these incidents has had on her. And to make her feel bad about looking for relief when the school is unable to protect my children is once again unacceptable. And as you can see on Grosso's one, I attached a copy of the letter that I've been going back and forth with over email. And last but not least, educational progress. Recently, Democracy Prep has been demoted to a Tier 3 status from Tier 2, scoring a 31% on the 2017 school report, meaning schools fall significantly short of high performance standards, showing inadequate performance. So those are just a few of the issues. So I proposed a few quick resolutions. Number 1, I propose that we remove the charter from Democracy Prep. Between the removal of Democracy Prep and Excel Academy, a school that's in a 3-mile radius, this will send a message that the district will no longer tolerate or fund outside entities that do not show daily results of our children succeeding and exceeding. Number 2, I propose we implement a system that will examine the daily practices of charter schools in the district. And number 3, create a program for relief and for problem solving involving the parents in charter schools. This entity of relief should be separate from the charter school itself. And yeah, that's it, just
Thank you very much. We'll go on, and then we'll come back next one. Coach Jones.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is David Koenig. I'm here with my fellow teachers from the Empower Ed Teacher Council. Last week, I attended a celebratory luncheon for the class of 2018 at Paul International High School, the charter school where I've taught for the past 5 years. I sat at the table with some of my fellow teachers, most of whom have also been to school for 4 to 6 years, and I reflected on the quality of the people who I've worked with at Paul, and how lucky the school has been to assemble a strong teaching staff and to keep the core of our team together for the past 4 years. And then my colleagues and I began to talk about the future. As I suspected, not one person at the table plans to stay at Paul for their entire career, and no one could even speak with certainty about their plans beyond next year. As I'm sure you know, at this moment approximately half of all public school students in DC attend charter schools. While these schools have produced varying results as measured by test scores and other types of data, there is one area in which charter schools are clearly failing: stability. These schools do not provide their students the stable environments and durable cultures they need. The culture that does exist in DC charters is a culture of churn, which hurts the schools and their students in countless ways. This culture is one of several factors contributing to the powerlessness of teachers in DC charters. Teachers fear to speak out about problems in their schools because of the real possibility that they could be fired or otherwise retaliated against. They likewise fail to advocate for changes to harmful educational policies, such as the overemphasis on standardized testing and the monetization of charter school students. Again, because of fear, but also because many sense that one lonely voice in the wilderness cannot be effective. There is an urgent need for charter school teachers to organize in order to gain the job security and benefits that are essential to building a stable teaching staff. These organizations should also serve as vehicles for teachers to add their collective voice to the debate over the future of our schools. They might be in the form of traditional unions, or the teacher teams that Empower Ed is attempting to build, or some other group that engages in concerted activity, but they must be built. Currently, the AFT is attempting to unionize charter school teachers on a largely secret, school-by-school basis. This is a flawed strategy, as evidenced by the results. Our unionizing effort at Paul last year ultimately failed in the face of a withering anti-union campaign by the school and its law firm, Jones Day. The only charter in DC to successfully unionize, one of the campuses in the Cesar Chavez network, is struggling to negotiate a contract in the face of stonewalling by the school's board. If we are going to build a stable school system in Washington, D.C., which consistently produces students who are productive and engaged citizens, teachers must build organizations to advocate for themselves and for real common sense school reform. This effort must be public and it must be citywide. It will likely require a high level of political support. In short, it probably requires support from you, the D.C. Council. For that reason, I'm asking each of you to consider taking a public stance in support of charter school unions and other organizing efforts in charters and in DCPS, and to take a hard look at the schools, boards of trustees, and outside groups who are fighting against those organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Liz Koenig, a DC Public Charter School teacher and a member of Empower Ed's Teacher Council. Empower Ed is an organization that's becoming an invaluable resource for teachers seeking to collectively raise their voices on important issues and build trusting relationships in their own schools. I am here today to ask that charter schools be held to the same standards of transparency as other public institutions in the city. Currently, DC public charter schools are exempt from the DC Open Meetings Act and from complying with lawful FOIA requests, despite an effort to amend the Open Meetings Act a few years ago. Why is this? Public and democratic institutions depend on active engagement and oversight of informed participants. I am both a parent of a child in a charter school and a teacher at a charter school here in the city. As a parent and as a teacher, I've learned that the best schools are built on trusting relationships between students and teachers, between parents and teachers, and between teachers and their schools. A key factor in building trusting relationships is transparency. Without stakeholders such as teachers and parents being able to seek and receive information and attend board meetings, charter schools are free to keep unpopular and perhaps ill-informed decisions out of the public eye. Parents, teachers, and taxpayers are kept in the dark about important curricular, mission, or budgetary decisions made by the schools that ostensibly serve them. Boards become more secretive, insulated from negative feedback in response to their decisions, and less responsive to public concerns. I work at a charter school where the board is largely invisible to the school community, and no teachers are invited to serve on the board. In fact, teachers have in the past been actively discouraged from attending board meetings, a blow to trusting relationships between our teachers and our board. Teachers should not have to wonder about the identities and the agendas of their unelected charter school boards. Parents and the public should not have to rely on the public charter school board alone to keep their individual charter school boards honest and transparent. Given the large amount of public funds that the charter sector receives, it at the very least needs to be transparent to the public it serves. Anything less invites governance based on political, personal, or financial agendas, rather than the needs of the students and the community. Anything less implies that charter school boards have something to hide from the teachers that they employ and the families that they serve. Transparency builds trust. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mitch. Good
Hi.
afternoon.
Good afternoon, same here. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Erica Mitchell. I'm a DC charter school teacher and a member of the Empower Ed Teacher Council. We are not moving until there is a silent, single, and straight line. A statement you may frequently hear from educators and administrators as you're walking through the halls of public and charter schools throughout the United States in urban settings. Hundreds of students are being penalized, disciplined, suspended, and expelled at alarming rates from schools due to behaviors some view as inappropriate. These inappropriate and unfair behavior expectations have and will continue to have a negative impact on students emotionally, socially, and academically. These behavioral and discipline expectations that are put in place in mostly urban settings not only has had a negative impact on students, but educators as well. When receiving weekly emails from my administration, educators at my school are always reminded of student behavior expectations and the consequences if they are not met. Yes, consequences. If students are not in a single, silent, and straight line, it is stated in the email, teachers will receive a written reprimand. After receiving 3 write-ups, teachers will most likely not be offered employment for the following school year, which causes stress and plays a role in teacher retention at a time when teacher turnover in DC schools is alarmingly high. As an observer and educator in an urban setting, this form of pedagogy aligns with the pedagogy of poverty, which is most likely to teach students in urban settings. This pedagogy encourages teachers to teach, give directions, and make sure that there are consequences in place for inappropriate behaviors. The pedagogy of poverty encourages students to listen, follow directions, and learn schools and expectations. This approach to teaching and learning is doing more harm to educators and students than good. Instead of creating positive and healthy learning environments that will help students reach their full potential, be creative, innovative, critical thinkers that are productive citizens and change makers, schools are more focused on students being in control. As stated by former educator Dr. Martin Haberman in his article, The Pedagogy of Poverty versus Good Teaching, unfortunately, the pedagogy of poverty does not work. Youngsters achieve neither minimum levels of life skills nor what they are capable of learning. The classroom atmosphere created by constant teacher direction and student compliance seeds with passive resentment that sometimes bubbles up into overt resistance. At a time when we say we are prioritizing social, emotional learning, and restorative practices, this approach betrays both goals. These resistant and deviant behaviors that lead to thousands of students receiving detention, suspension, school expulsion, and some getting arrested has led to racial disparities. According to the 2015-2016 Civil Rights Data Collection, Black male students represented 8% of enrolled students and accounted for 23% of students expelled. Black female students represented 8% of the student enrollment and accounted for 10% of students who were expelled. Black male students represented 8% of enrolled students and accounted for 25% of students who received an out-of-school suspension. Black female students represented 8% of the school enrollment and accounted for 14% of students who received out-of-school suspension. As we end the 2017-18 school year, I have witnessed frustrated and upset educators who question their ability to meet discipline and behavioral expectations on a daily basis. The frustration that has led to at least 5 teachers leaving in the middle of the school year and others mentally drained, waiting to see if they will be offered employment for the following school year. If the educational system continues to focus on students performing a single, silent, and straight line, many students will lack essential social and emotional skills and risk dropping out of school. The educational system will also continue to lose highly qualified and passionate educators. Stories like these matters. That's why it's essential for DCPS and DC charter schools to collaborate with organizations like Empower Ed to empower and motivate teachers to lead in our schools, advocate for themselves and students, and to have a voice that will advocate for an immediate change in today's educational system that will help both students and educators reach their full potential.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony, all of you being here. Mr. Hall, I know my staff has been in touch with you, and we have great sympathy for what's happening. And I'm actually meeting with Mr. Pearson tomorrow, my regular scheduled meeting, and I'm going to bring up these issues with him directly. I have always said that I support charter schools, but they then have to be better than DCPS schools. They can't be worse, and they certainly shouldn't be just as good because they're here to offer an option of choice that should and always can be better if we have high standards. And I get very disappointed when I hear stories like this, and I've heard them before. So it just means a lot to me that you came down and testified and engaged with my office, and we'll work with you, and we'll certainly bring it up with Mr. Pearson tomorrow as well. I know that they're up for their 5-year review this year, Democracy Prep is, so that is relevant, and they need to be put on notice if they are, as well as you're saying, I didn't know this, but in Tier 3, they will be put on some sort of notice. So I also know that they have some of the highest suspension rates in the city, and so clearly their approach to school, safety is not working. If this is the reality of your children in school, and there needs to be a different approach. So thank you for being here. I want to just say, I think kind of the theme between the three of you is this question of, do I support teachers being organized? And I think I do. I think it's really important that you are, and I think then you need to give them the opportunity to do that. There is a, as you know, there's a way to do that, Cesar Chavez did, at least with one of their campuses, but I know they're having issues now. And I heard back from some folks that that's an issue, so, but I certainly support organizational efforts. I think you guys need to be organized. I think you should do cross-sector organization like you're doing in Empower Ed, and bring your issues to me and to other leaders regularly. I can't, be everywhere at the same time, so I really need you guys to stay engaged. Mr. Goldstein has been involved in my office some, which I appreciate, the more the better. So I really appreciate that. And I think, Ms. Mitchell, your points, on the impact of discipline policies on teachers is a really important point that people don't realize that, and it goes across the board in the school when that's the attitude, or that's the kind of what is the word I'm looking for, the environment that they're cultivating in the school is one of punishment and of penalizing versus one of nurturing. And I can tell you, in the 5 years I've been on the council, I've been in every single school in the city, and you can tell immediately when you go into the building what type of environment it is based on kind of the interactions with students, parents, teachers, administrators right away. And I'm a firm believer that a school that adopts policies around making sure that you believe in every child, love every child, and give every parent an opportunity to be fully engaged are schools that are making the biggest difference. So it sounds like you guys have all had experiences where you're constantly pressured to do something different. Do you guys think, and I'm just going to go back to a couple of my questions, I think both Mr. and Ms. Koenig, you guys spoke about transparency, about the understanding what's really going on there. What's the best path for that? How can I insist on more transparency and get more transparency other than having hearings like this? Public conversations are going to be out in every ward this year for public meetings, public town halls throughout the summer to hear from you, and we've done that in the past, and people have shown up. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the great first step would be, as in my testimony, the Open Meetings Act, having that apply to charter schools. Teachers and parents are on the ground in each school wanting to, be the eyes on the ground for you, but it's a school by school thing, whether the public is invited and how open the board is.
Right.
So use those people, but we need to have the avenue to get the information and be there to do that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'd just like to say how that applies to my testimony as well. I would very much like to know what the conversations were in the Paul board last year. Why were they so opposed to their teachers organizing? Why did they not want to grant us collective bargaining rights? How much money did they pay to Jones Day? What were their motivations? I can't know any of those things because they're not subject to board reports.
Okay, I appreciate that. Sure, Sean.
I just want to add something to your question. I've had an idea, I just want to throw this out here briefly, for something that I call 360 classrooms. And I had an idea, and I think, the district, we should lead the nation with not only education, but with everything. So something like this, we can have a 360-degree camera in every classroom in the district. And this camera should be streaming live what's happening in the classroom, and parents should have a password and access where they can use a mobile device or any computer at any given time and check out what's happening in the classroom. This is true transparency, and I think it will also enforce everyone to be on their best behavior at all times. Just an idea.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you all very much. Look forward to hearing a little bit. And it includes Benjamin Michael Williams, teacher at Capital City Public Charter School, member of Empower Ed. Kristen Paonessa, I guess. Am I saying that right?
Paonessa.
Paonessa.
You got it.
I like that, Paonessa. Who's also a teacher at DC Charter School. Carmel Henry, a DCPS teacher, Empower Ed member. And Olurotimi Bagboham.
He's like right next way, so.
Okay, I'll move to the next one. Tanisha Holder. Tanisha Holder, good afternoon. Come on up, Ms. Holder. DCPS teacher as well. Mr. Williams, we'll start with you, sir.
Sure.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Ben Williams. I am a teacher and have been teaching in DC Public Schools for DC Public Charter Schools for 4 years now. Glad to be here today, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you guys. Over the past 4 years, I've been privileged to work at 2 Tier 1 charter schools here in DC. These schools, my interactions with students and families, and my experience over these past 4 years have shaped my views on educational policy issues. Today I would like to speak with you about the need for schools to use a variety of assessment measures to monitor and evaluate student progress, performance, and overall learning outcomes. I believe that a variety of assessment measures are necessary in the district's classrooms to ensure students receive equitable learning opportunities and a chance at equitable learning outcomes. Overall, the benefits of teachers using a variety of assessment measures, I believe, are numerous. It's important to note that Two Rivers Public Charter School and Capital City Public Charter School are both expeditionary learning schools. This means that their curriculum and instruction centralize learning around real world and authentic context. Although these 2 schools have endorsed this model, other teachers across the district are hamstrung from being able to use experiential and project-based learning methods. That's partially why I'm here today. I think that this limits teachers' potential to evaluate student learning by suppressing the options that they have available as educators. Further, it limits students' range of options in expressing their understanding and in allowing students' interest to drive the curriculum. For instance, at Two Rivers Public Charter Schools, my students created a student-centered newscast to broaden public awareness of the different economic and social impacts of different food systems. And at Capital City Public Charter School, my students, seniors in particular, have designed their own personal learning expeditions. I've seen firsthand how this drives engagement, and also, as previous panelists have said, helps students cultivate the social and emotional learning skills in authentic ways. A couple of points to kind of validate and raise the importance of these types of learning contexts and assessments is that according to research by Stanford professor Linda Darling-Hammond and a recent research study by Google, social emotional skills such as teamwork, collaboration, and moral character are increasingly important. Businesses are always looking for employees